Why men return after no contact. We live in a world where everyone's supposed to move on quickly. Swipe, scroll, silence, repeat. But real connection doesn't work that way, does it? No contact can feel brutal, like the story ended mid-chapter and the pages just vanished. But here's what most people won't say. Silence doesn't mean nothing's happening. It means the real work, the uncomfortable, messy, soul-stretching work, might just be beginning. So why do men come back after the silence? We tend to think that silence means someone has moved on, that their absence is a kind of answer. But the truth? Silence is rarely empty. It's full of questions, echoes, unresolved thoughts. It's not a void, it's a mirror. And in that mirror, clarity begins to form. When a man pulls away, when he goes quiet, when the thread of communication snaps, it's easy to feel like the story is over. But more often than not, that silence isn't about forgetting, it's about processing, about confronting the feelings he didn't know how to carry when everything was loud, when emotions were running high, when the pressure to react quickly was stronger than the wisdom to sit still. Because here's what people don't say out loud. Most of us don't do our deepest thinking in the middle of a conversation. We do it after, in the quiet, in the spaces where no one is watching, when the noise has settled and all that's left is us, alone with our own truths. The truths we didn't want to face, the ones that sting, the ones that whisper, maybe I mishandled that. Maybe I didn't show her what she really meant to me. Distance has a way of stripping away distraction. When someone is no longer accessible, their presence starts to be felt in a different way, more sharply, more honestly. The little things become big things. The absence starts to shape a new kind of awareness, not the kind that comes from longing, but the kind that's born from perspective. Real, sobering perspective. And that's where the clarity begins. Not all at once, not in some movie scene epiphany, but slowly, in the rhythm of days without you, in the empty spaces that used to be filled with your voice, in the realization that connection, true connection, doesn't just vanish, it lingers, it teaches, it humbles. The silence doesn't just reveal what was lost, it also illuminates what was real. And sometimes, when a man returns after no contact, it's not because he missed you in a moment of weakness. It's because the distance gave him the strength to finally face what he had been running from. His own feelings, his own regrets, his own truth. There's this myth we all quietly buy into, that if enough time passes, our feelings just dissolve. That if we stop talking about something, it loses its power. That distance, distraction, or even denial can erase the emotional imprint someone leaves on us. But that's not how it works. Emotions aren't water on pavement after a rain. They don't evaporate when the sun comes out. They sink in, they settle, they find places inside us to live. And the longer we avoid them, the more creative they get at finding ways to be seen. When a man walks away, when the contact cuts off, he might believe he's burying those emotions, that he's choosing peace, control, strength. But emotions aren't obedient. They don't just sit quietly in the corner because we told them to. They evolve, they grow, they change form. What starts as anger might soften into sadness. What felt like relief might begin to feel like loss. What was once dismissed as no big deal may slowly, stubbornly take shape as something that mattered more than I could admit at the time. And this is where the return often begins. Not in a grand gesture, but in a quiet shift inside. A tug. A memory that won't let go. A scent, a song, a sentence that unlocks a door he thought was permanently shut. That's how emotion works. It waits, it transforms, and it's not weakness. It's being human. You see, we're not wired to forget real connection. We're not built to sever deep bonds and walk away untouched. We may suppress, we may distract, we may pretend, but underneath all of that, emotions are still moving, still evolving, still calling us back to the truth we tried to escape. And for many men, it's not until the noise dies down, until the pride burns off and the distractions wear thin, that they begin to realize those emotions never left. They just changed their shape. They matured. They became questions that need answers, stories that need resolution, feelings that refuse to stay buried. So when he returns, it's often not out of nowhere. It's the product of everything that's been growing underground, the slow bloom of emotional honesty, the quiet reckoning that what he felt wasn't temporary, even if he treated it like it was. Because love doesn't disappear, it transforms, and sometimes when it evolves enough, it brings him right back to where he left it. In the thick of conflict or disconnection, the ego is loud. It's that voice that says, I don't need this, I'm fine without her, I'm better off alone. It's the armor, the defense mechanism, the survival suit we put on when vulnerability feels like too much. The ego wants to win. It wants the last word, the upper hand, the illusion of control. But here's the thing no one tells you when you're caught in that tug of war. the ego is temporary. It's built for reaction, not reflection. It doesn't know how to love, it only knows how to protect. And eventually, it gets tired. Over time, when the fire of pride burns down, the noise of the ego fades, and what's left, the heart, quiet, steady, and full of memories it never discarded. Because the heart doesn't argue, it doesn't bluff, it just remembers. It remembers the way you laughed without filtering yourself. It remembers the safety of being fully seen. It remembers how the world felt softer with you in it. The heart isn't concerned with who was right or who won. It's concerned with connection, meaning, truth. And once the ego has had its moment, once it's finished stomping and storming and convincing itself that indifference is strength, the heart steps in. And the heart says, you were never indifferent. You were afraid. You didn't stop caring, you just didn't know how to say it without losing face. This is the reckoning point, when the distance has worn down the walls, and all that's left is the quiet ache of what was real. And that's often when a man begins to return. Not out of weakness, but because the noise finally cleared, and he can feel again. Not just react, feel. And here's what's powerful. The heart remembers things the ego tried to delete. It remembers the truth under the argument. It remembers the tenderness buried beneath the silence. It remembers that it wasn't just about love, it was about being known. And that kind of memory doesn't go away. It waits, it endures, and eventually it calls him home to himself, and maybe back to you. We don't always see what we have until it's no longer there. It's a cliche, sure, but like most cliches, it's only repeated so often because it's so deeply, painfully true. When something or someone is right in front of us, we tend to take it for granted. Not because we're ungrateful, but because we're used to it. The consistency dulls our awareness. Familiarity blurs the depth. Then one day, silence replaces presence. The calls stop. The warmth disappears. The soft, invisible thread that tethered you to someone is just gone. And that absence, it does something powerful. It wakes you up. You start to notice things you didn't before. The way she listened, really listened, when your words stumbled. The way she showed up when life got messy. The small ways she made your world brighter, safer, more honest. And those memories, they don't haunt, they teach. They show you what you were blind to in the moment. They replay scenes in a different light, one not tinted by ego, distraction, or emotional overwhelm. Loss forces reflection. It cracks open the protective shell that pride built. It clears the fog that anger left behind. It shines a harsh but necessary light on all the moments that were real and all the ways we failed to honor them. When a man walks away, he may feel certain, strong, in control, but as the dust settles and the distractions fade, what begins to rise is something quieter and far more powerful. Clarity, not the kind that comes from logic or convenience, but the kind that comes from the ache of missing something that can't be replaced. He begins to realize she wasn't just there. She mattered. That her absence doesn't just change the atmosphere, it changes him. That her love wasn't a given, it was a gift. And that shift, that perspective, it's often what begins the journey back. Not always toward reconciliation, but toward truth, toward growth, toward humility. Because sometimes we don't return just to rekindle what was. Sometimes we return because the loss showed us who we were and who we weren't ready to be until now. When a relationship breaks, there's a moment, maybe not right away, but eventually, where survival mode kicks in. You push through the hurt, you distract yourself, you tell your friends you're fine, you fill your time, your feed, your calendar, just to keep from feeling everything at once. And then healing begins. But healing isn't some perfectly packaged, Instagrammable journey. It's messy, it's nonlinear, it doesn't always look like strength. Sometimes it looks like crying over a song you didn't even like when you were together. Sometimes it looks like replaying a memory and realizing for the first time that you were the one who shut down, pulled away, let fear speak louder than love. And that's where curiosity is born. Healing opens the door to questions you weren't ready to ask before, not because the answers weren't there, but because your ego, your pain, or your shame couldn't hear them yet. Questions like, what was I really afraid of? What would it have looked like if I had stayed present instead of shutting down? Did I ever really understand what she needed, or was I too focused on protecting myself? That's what time apart does. It strips away the noise, the patterns, the autopilot. And when the healing has done enough of its quiet work, space opens up. And once curiosity enters the picture, return becomes possible. Because the man who couldn't hear you before might finally be listening, not to you yet, but to himself, to his choices, to his discomfort, to the story he told himself about love and how much of it he was willing to risk. Healing softens the grip of old stories. The ones that say, vulnerability is weakness, needing someone is dangerous, she'll be better off without me. It starts to replace them with newer truths, braver ones. And sometimes, in the quiet aftermath of healing, a new kind of curiosity rises. What if she saw a version of me I wasn't ready to be, but could become now? That thought, it doesn't just bring him back to you, it brings him back to possibility. And when a man returns from that place, not just from missing you, but from learning himself, that's not a circle. That's a spiral upward. It's a man changed by his own growth. That's not a rewind. It's a deeper understanding. We grow up thinking closure is something final, a conversation that ties the loose ends, a goodbye that explains everything, a clean finish that gives us permission to move on without looking back. But real life isn't so tidy. Sometimes closure doesn't come with clarity. Sometimes it comes through chaos. A door slams, a message goes unanswered, someone disappears, and we're left holding the weight of words that never got spoken. And yet, even in that silence, something deeper begins to unfold. Because closure isn't always about ending something. Sometimes it's about understanding it. And that kind of closure, that's an inside job. When a man returns after no contact, it's not always to restart what you had. Sometimes it's because he's finally ready to face what he couldn't before. The impact, the lessons, the truth. He's not just revisiting the past, he's seeking meaning in it. And that return might not come with a perfect apology or a well-rehearsed explanation. It might be awkward, unfinished, messy. But underneath all of that is often the need to make sense of something that left him changed. Because we don't always know the value of a relationship until it echoes into our healing. We don't always understand the depth of connection until we're far enough away to see it clearly. And we definitely don't grasp the full weight of someone's presence until we're forced to sit with their absence. So when he reaches out, it may not be to reclaim what was lost. It may be to honor it, to learn from it, to witness it, maybe for the first time without the fear, defensiveness, or confusion that was there before. And that's powerful, because closure doesn't always say, let's try again. Sometimes it says, I see you now and I know what you were trying to give me, and I want to thank you, not for how it ended, but for how it grew me. We spend so much time bracing for people to come back just to reopen wounds. But what if instead they come back to offer peace? And what if your closure doesn't depend on their words, but on your ability to receive them with the strength of someone who knows their worth, regardless of how the story ended? Closure isn't a full stop. Sometimes it's a comma, a pause that lets you look back, not with pain, but with clarity and maybe even grace. And that's real healing. Conclusion, when they return. So why do men return after no contact? Not always for the reasons we expect. Not always to rekindle or to right every wrong, but often, quietly and sometimes even clumsily, they return because something inside them changed. They return after the silence taught them something their pride couldn't. They return because the distance held up a mirror and they finally looked. They return not always for another chance, but for understanding, for ownership, for truth. And here's the part that's just as important. You don't need to accept someone's return to validate your worth. You don't have to reopen old doors to prove you've healed, because their return isn't about you not being enough. It's about them finally feeling the weight of what they once took for granted. Let it empower you, let it affirm you, but never let it confuse your progress with their presence. If they come back with sincerity, growth, and clarity, and it aligns with your peace, beautiful. If they come back just to revisit the past and not to grow from it, honor your own evolution by standing in your truth. Because love doesn't just ask, will you come back? It asks, are we both better now? Are we ready to see each other fully? And if the answer is yes, from both sides, then maybe it's not a return at all. Maybe it's a beginning.